We're doing brush remediation in Southern California. I figured it'd be helpful to show some people maybe in a similar situation, or even people that may not be familiar with what goes into brush remediation. What we want to do, we've got a lot of native sage to the left here. In the back there is what's called Laurel Sumac. We need to basically thin a lot of this out. During wildfire season, this is going to become very dry, and there's two different types of fire. There's what's called low and slow, which is going to stay in the underbrush, and then what I call hot and high is when it starts to get up into these canopies. Your fire is going to start to jump. So from your low scrub to your middle height to your, these are about 8 or 9 feet. And if all of this underbrush goes up, you're going to get up here into the top of this canopy of this pine tree. And that's going to send sparks right up over the hill into the house. So it's two risks that we're trying to avoid. We want to stop a low and slow fire from getting up and jumping up into the canopy. And once it hits that canopy, it's going to start shooting sparks up to your dwelling. And that's one of the main reasons houses will ignite here. You get sparks stuck up under the eave, or they even go through the eave up into your attic through the vents. And from there, it's really hard to stop that fire. The second way a fire is going to get your home is through just the heat. It can get so hot outside that even if you prevent the sparks from coming in your house, you're going to reach the flash point of material inside the house. So your drywall, the studs in your attic, and then they're going to go up in smoke. So really what we're going to do, we're going to thin this vegetation out for two reasons. It's going to stop that convective heat from getting close to the house. This isn't very near the house, so more importantly, it's going to stop from jumping up into this tree canopy, which would then shower the house with sparks. I'm going to use the hedge clipper attachment today. The reason for this, these are fairly woody plants. So what I'm going to do is really take about half to 2/3 of these plants off. We're going to leave the rootstock in, and we're going to come through and trim this Laurel Sumac pretty aggressively in the one that's in the corner, and probably thin this edge out a little bit. So sit back and enjoy the video. Thank you. Alright guys, that's basically it. If you remember, it was very heavily vegetated in this section, mostly native sage. Got to this Laurel Sumac, I was able to take about close to half of that mass out and then clear this area, do a little trimming on this sumac. Now it may not completely prevent a fire from burning slow. To get this, I mean, that's a pretty big jump. This now becomes manageable basically with a garden hose. A fire crew now has the safety to get back into this area with any of their grubbing tools to help do some fire suppression. I will come through with a different head on the trimmer just to try and take this a little closer to the ground and do some basically fine mulching. It's not super critical, all of the stuff that's been cut. I've let a lot of that just fall to the ground. It's not super critical to get that cleaned up. Yes, it will burn to some extent. It also acts as a little bit of a mulch layer, so it's going to help a little bit with soil retention. Over the years, if you keep taking everything out, at least in my opinion, I feel like you're doing some damage. I know this is going to look aggressive to folks that aren't familiar with the territory. You're probably looking at this saying, hey buddy, you killed all that sage. These plants are extraordinarily hardy. They've adapted out here to both the drought and the burn cycle. I could take every single one off, almost down to the root stock. No green vegetation on them. They're going to grow back the next year. About the only two things I've seen kill these trees are frost. These Laurel Sumacs do not survive a frost. And then with the sage, that getting overcrowded by some of the Laurel Sumac or some of the other varieties of sage, that's typically the only time these plants will die. So I hope that was informative, again, to folks either that just recently acquired a property that they need to clear the brush from, or folks that may not be as familiar as what brush remediation really means. I highly recommend, if you have thick brush like this, getting one of those hedge clipper heads. Mine was about $300. I know you can get them cheaper. What's nice about having it on my trimmer is I'm not having to consistently bend over to take foliage off down towards the ground. And I also have significantly higher of a reach. It does make the trimmer itself a little unwieldy, but that's okay.